So yesterday we made this wheel. We're going to continue with it today. A few things that I want to show you. There's something called a section view, and I think this would be one of the most appropriate times to show you how to do that. If I want to see what the wheel looks like if I were to cut it in half, if there's an existing plane, you can go to that plane. So I'm going to do this right plane here, okay? You can go to that plane, you can right click, and you can choose suppress. Or sorry, I lied, section view. If you choose section view, you can see it cut it in half. And then you can actually do other fancy things, like you can extend it if you want. You can even like rotate it some. There's all these things that you can do, okay? But you can get the idea of what's going on there. It's cutting it in half. And the only thing that I would remind you about section views, okay? You have to like remember where you applied it, all right? So I did it on the right plane. So to undo the section view, I right click on the right plane and I can turn it off or I can edit it. So I'm going to turn off that section view because I don't want it anymore, okay? That's the big thing. You have to remember where you apply the section view. We have questions about section views. All right. So yesterday, I did a quick little demonstration of something. I did this cutout here, and then I circle patterned it. And I did it really quick. But the point that I wanted to make is if you don't do this intelligently, what can happen is you get spokes like this, where the thickness of the spoke changes. So imagine that I did my spokes like as parts of a pizza slice, okay? So imagine this is like basically part of a pizza slice, all right? There are some things I could do to get this symmetric and lined up, but you have to understand that even if I do those things, if I want the spokes to be the same thickness throughout, then what I need is I actually need lines that are parallel, not lines that feed into the center. So I'm going to show you a way to do that. This is a geometry exercise. You may want to accomplish other things, and if you need help, I can help you later, but I'm going to show you this to kind of help you with making some spokes. So I have drawn, I'm going to start from the beginning here. I'm going to do this from the beginning. We're going to get rid of this pattern. I'm going to get rid of this extrusion. And I'm going to get rid of this sketch. And I'm going to make a new sketch again. So as you may recall, yesterday I made a sketch on top of this wheel. But I want to be able to see this edge right here and this edge right here. And the way to do that is right here. It's in between the text tool and like the fillet tool. There is this use project. This is the project thing. And if you click on that, then you can click on a feature or a rim or a vertex or edge or face, and it will project it into the plane. So I clicked on this edge there, and now in my sketch, there's a black circle. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click on the bottom of this inner wall, and it's projected it onto my sketch, which is very, very helpful. Questions about projecting? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually sketch. So one way you could do this is you could quite literally draw two lines, which is what I did yesterday. You could draw two lines like this. And in on shape, don't exit out of your sketch, but in on shape, that would be enough. You can see that I can select that region. So if I do an extrusion, it does allow me to select that region there, okay? However, the problem is that I need, when I pattern this, I need this edge to be parallel with the edge for the next hole. And that is not something that's easy to do. So I'm going to show you how to do it. The first thing you want to do is you want to determine how many of these gaps or holes you want. How many do we want, boys? What are you thinking? 5, 6, 8, 20? How many do you want?
6.
6? Okay, that's a valid number. So I'm going to delete that line. I'm going to delete this line. All right. I'm going to draw 2 lines. I'm going to draw a pizza slice. I'm going to start at the center, and I'm going to go to the outer circle. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Start at the center and go to the outer circle. Now, you said 6. How many degrees are in a circle?
360.
So how many would be 1/6 of that? So each gap has to basically be allocated 60 degrees. Does that make sense? And that's not just the gap, because if every single gap or a hole was 60 degrees, I'd have 360 degrees of holes, which is also known as deleting everything. But like a spoke plus the hole combined would be 60 degrees. So what I'm going to basically be drawing 60 degrees worth of space. And so you can do this. If you dimension between 2 lines that join at a corner or are not parallel to each other, you can actually dimension an angle. So I'm going to dimension from here to here, and it's an angle. And I'm going to type 60. So I have 60 degrees. I think it's good form to do something to lock this in an intelligent location. One possibility is to center it about one of the axes. Another possibility would be to take one edge and put it along this axis. I'm going to center it though. There's a really easy way to center this. One single constraint. Let's see if we can use our geometry skills today. There's a single constraint I could use. It is one we've used before. That would cause these two to be split at equal angles about this. Like it'd be centered about this. Thoughts? What do you think we might be able to do to make that happen? I could maybe do a symmetric constraint. There is like symmetrical stuff, but this is an easy one we've already used before. What do you think about something on those lines that would for sure be true if this was split equally? Or maybe at the endpoints of the lines.
Symmetric.
No, we're not going to use that one. You could use that one, but we're not going to use it. This is even simpler. Did you say something like?
No, okay.
I'm not saying symmetric wouldn't work here, but this is not that complex of a feature. We don't need to do a symmetrical constraint. I mean, what do you notice about the endpoints of the lines when this split equally? As opposed to like when it's like this.
Horizontally.
They're aligned horizontally.
Oh.
So you can go and you can do a horizontal constraint. And you can click here. And you can click here. And it's aligned horizontal. Are we good? Yeah. Now, I am not using those lines to make my extrusion. I'm using those lines to help me draw what I actually want. So these should probably be made into construction lines. So I'm going to click both of them. In on shape, you typically select the stuff first, and then you click on construction. So they're both dashed lines. Don't exit out of the sketch, just watch. Because they're dashed lines, you'll notice when I try to do extrude, I can no longer grab that region. It ignores the construction lines, right? It only respects object lines. So that is the difference between the two. Okay. So those come out from the center of the circle. So now I'm going to draw the actual edges of what's going to be my hole. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from here to here. be very careful about what's automatically applied as a constraint. If I do this intelligently, I'm not actually getting to come up, so don't worry about that. It's not going to work. So just make sure you don't apply anything other than that coincident constraint, which just means the end point of the line is locked onto the circle. I'm going to draw a line there, and I'm going to draw another line here. Okay? Now, what I can do is I can use a parallel constraint, and I can make this edge parallel to this construction line I drew. And I can make this edge parallel to this other construction line that I drew. There's one more constraint that I should probably apply.
The parallel constraints.
Because right now, I don't have anything to lock these in so that they're symmetrical.
Horizontal.
I could do horizontal. I would have to make the tops horizontal and the bottoms horizontal. That is valid. There's something else I could do though.
Symmetrical.
No, it's not symmetrical. What else could I do?
Equal.
If I make them the same length, this is flexing our geometry skills, the only way they could be equal is if they're symmetrical, right? Do you see that? Now they're still blue, but notice if I move one, the other one moves, right? They have to mirror each other. So at this point, all you have to do is decide how wide do you want your spoke. So I can go to this edge and I can dimension its distance. Watch, this is really cool. If you have your cursor in between the center line or construction line and this edge, it's just the distance between the two. But if before you place the dimension, you move your cursor to be on the outside, it makes it a diameter symbol, which is not really a diameter, but it does double it automatically, right? Which is kind of cool because now I can go to my wheel and I can measure the width of my spoke and I don't have to do any math. I don't have to divide that by 2. I can just type that number. And I got 4.7. Okay? If you don't like that number, you can make it whatever you want. Maybe I want to do 3.5. Or maybe I want to do 3.1. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. I think I'm going to go with 3. Did you ask how I did the dimension like this?
I figured.
Okay. And I'm done. Only use 2 dimensions, one an angle and one distance. Everything else was 3 constraints. And now I can go extrude that. When you extrude, you're cutting material away. So you're going to want to remove. And how far? I would not put in a distance. What do you think we should probably choose? Yeah, I would just go up to next. And then it'll cut up to this. So if you ever change that thickness, it'll still cut through it exactly. And we're done. We have our cut. Before we go any further, there's something that I have not done yet. I typically wait until I have at least 2 features before I do it. Yeah, I should probably name them. So this, I'm going to rename the wheel profile because that's what it is. It's the profile for that revolve. And then this is like the wheel. And then this is like the hole for the spokes. So I'll call that the spoke hole. And now, all I have to do is a pattern. So I go here to the linear pattern and click the drop down so I can choose circular pattern. One thing you need to remember, What's the first thing you need to do before you do a pattern? You always have to do this before you pattern something. Remember? I'll give you a hint. I'm not able to click on anything. At least not that I want.
You suppress the extrude.
Every time I click, it just selects the entire part. What do I need to change?
Order.
The
order.
No. We've done this before. Before you do a pattern, you have to change something, or it's not going to let you select what you want.
Oh, you can pattern.
Very good. Up here, it starts, I don't know why it defaults to this, but it does. It defaults to part pattern. You want to click that and change it to feature pattern. And then you do you, but I personally like selecting the features over here, especially if you're patterning like removals of material. It's kind of hard to click on nothing, right? How do you tell it nothing? I want you to repeat or pattern to nothing. Like if I try to click here in this gap, it's just empty space. There's nothing to click on. So I'm going to click on the feature over here in my little library table of contents thing. So it's got the spoke hole selected, and then you choose the axis of pattern. And you can literally choose anything that goes in a circle. So I could choose this edge. I could choose this edge. I could choose this edge. I'm going to choose the outer one. How many did we want?
6.
Now, if I do that and I hit enter, it seems to not be rendering correctly. In fact, if I click the green check mark, don't do that, but if I do, nothing happened. It did not seem to be successful. I would say 90 to 95% of the time, if you ever encounter something like this, there's a very easy way to solve this problem. You click on the button or option called Reapply Features. You choose Reapply Features, and magically, it works. Maybe every once in a while, if like you've done everything right and it's just not generating, it might be a limitation of software. You're going to have to rethink how you do it. But most of the time, you just click Reapply Features. And there it is. And that's a pretty beautiful spoke. Look at it. It's a nice even width. Okay? It's beautiful. It's pretty. And I could go rename this circular pattern. I can call it the spoke pattern. Questions before we move on? Okay, if you look at your wheel, you might notice that there are some things that are rounded. So I'm going to go to my wheel profile. And I'm going to go dimension this right here. Now, I can't actually change this dimension, but I can still dimension it just to get the number 3.65. Okay. Why do I want that number? Well, if I go and I do a fillet, and I type in 3.65, then when I go fillet, say right here, it'll go all the way up to the edge. Now, that may or may not be actually what you want, but you certainly can do that, okay? The wheel definitely is filleted on that side. It's also filleted on the other side, though. But you need to probably do your spokes before you do this fillet. Because if I fillet it first, I don't know how the extrusion situation gets a little complicated. Depending on how you do your spokes, you might want to fill it first. Or you might want to fill it afterwards. It really depends on how you create the spoke. Okay? So I'm just going to fillet these. If you don't like this look, okay, so realistically, I highly doubt that the fillet actually goes all the way to the very edge, okay? It probably flattens out a little bit before it gets to the very edge. All right, so you can make this radius smaller, like I could do just 3, for example, and that kind of brings it in some. Kind of hard to measure that with calipers, but you notice it kind of has a little bit of flat lip first, okay? So I have filleted that. Well, that's a pretty good fillet. So I'm done. There's one more thing I'm going to do. If you flip your wheel over and look at the bottom, some of the spokes are big enough that they're basically like shelled. And we did the shell with the cat. So let's see, what button is it? I think rib, draft, shell, right there. There's a shell button right there. I can click on shell. Faces to remove. So I can go to a spoke and I can click on it, the bottom. And I can try and play with that shell thickness. We do like 1, for example. Okay. That seems to probably be, I don't know, a little too thick, maybe. 0.8, maybe. I'll try 0.8. That didn't render very well. Let's try it again.
0.8 doesn't work.
That's interesting. Oh, wait, there's 2 shells. That's why. Okay, cool. 1 worked, though. 1.2 works. 1 works. Well, I did 1, and it worked out. Now, you'll notice that it kind of rounded it inside there, which I don't really want. Shells can be really complicated. It also went inside to this thing, which, again, I also don't really want. So shells, like I said, shells can be complicated. But you could use the shell feature. If you're struggling with the shell feature, what you can do is you can potentially do the spokes first, shell, and then do the rest of the wheel. Or you can redo the wheel over, like you could do another revolve and use that second revolve to like fill back in the stuff that you didn't want removed with the shell. Those are not foolproof methods or necessarily the cleanest of methods, but you got to do what you got to do. That finishes what I'm going to refer to as the basic wheel. I am going to temporarily suppress my fillet, my pattern of the spoke, and that spoke itself. I am going to show you a different thing that you might do. Yeah, I would. So I've right-clicked on each of these and suppressed them. Suppressing is a really nice way to get whatever it is you're working on. Like if you want to like have 2 different alternates or options, right? You can like make one, suppress it, and then make the other one. And then you just choose which ones you want or don't want. It's a quick way to turn stuff on and off without deleting it or having to remake it later. I'm going to make another sketch on top. I'm going to project those same 2 circles. what I'm going to do this time, if you have the green wheel like I do, it's kind of more of a curve, right? So different wheels do different things. So I'm going to do like a curve shaped cutout. Now there's different ways you could do this. I'm just going to show you an arc. We haven't done a whole lot with arcs, but arcs are actually quite common. So there's different ways you can draw an arc. I'm going to do a 3-point arc. Let's go off to the side for a moment. When you're doing a 3-point arc, you click to place one endpoint, you click to place the other endpoint, and the third click controls the radius or curvature of the arc. 3-point arc is really, really good when you know exactly where the endpoints are. So what I can do, I can go back over here, and I can click on 3-point arc, and I can place one endpoint on the circle. I can place the other endpoint on the circle. And then my third click just kind of drives how big the arc is. How do I line up the left and the right side of my arc?
Horizontal.
How do I make them? You said something I didn't.
Horizontal.
Yeah, very good. Horizontal constraint. So I do a horizontal constraint, and that lines up the left side with the right side. So now I just have to control the size of my arc and how much of an arc do I have. So that's two things. I have to dimension the size of the arc. And then I have to control how much of the arc I have. So this is the size, and it's always a radius for an arc. It's never a diameter. You can put this center wherever you want. I could, if I wanted to, force it to be on this circle, which may or may not actually be desirable. If I did want that, I would do a coincident constraint. Coincident constraint just forces things to touch or be on each other. So I just forced that to be on there. I don't know if that's what I really want, but that's what I did. Chose to give it a radius of 7. I just picked a number to make it look good. Not saying that's a number that I measured. And I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did before. I'm going to cut. And I'm going to pattern. I've already done this before, so it's 100% review. Looks like 5 worked out really well. And now I have curved holes for my spokes. Questions? I can do the fillet at the end. I have spokes now. If you wanted, you could fill it. These edges, if you wanted to. So those edges are all kind of rounded. And I can even fill it basically the center hole, because the plastic pin only goes inside the bottom. So it doesn't matter if there's fillets on this top. And I have what I would say is a wheel that looks a little bit better, in my opinion, my humble opinion. If you want to see what I did last year, I spent a little bit more time on the wheel. And well, that's not true. I demoed the wheel, but then like during class, I kind of just like went out of my way to make a really good wheel. So this wheel, if you look carefully, is like raised up in the middle. Spokes are raised up. And the way I did that is I did this profile, and that profile did not have like spokes or anything like that connecting the inner and outer walls. So originally, sadly, it was in fact two pieces. It's definitely not ideal, but I then joined them after I did the revolve. And the reason why I did that was I really wanted to get that fillet in first. It was a lot easier getting that fillet in first. Notice when we did this last time, I did the cutouts with holes, and then I did the fillet after the fact. But here, it was easier because what I was doing is I was basically making a separate sketch for just the spokes. And you kind of see right here, I got these curved lines. And then once I had drawn that, I basically just did like a separate revolve on that. After I did that revolve, they were naturally joined, so that's why there's only one part after that point. Then I did this cutout, very similar to what I just did as my demonstration. And then I cut it out, and then I patterned it. One of the things that was really helpful was that shell. The way I did it, it shelled a little bit better. Still shelled inside there, which is not realistic, but it worked out. It doesn't look too bad. Probably need to do something to clean up that shell there. And that's how I made this one. So the big difference, if you go back, is basically I drew a profile for the spoke and revolved it rather than doing like the spokes all together with the wheels. I just separate sketch, separate extrusion or revolve. I guess it's revolve, and separate like what you might say. It's not flush with the top. It sticks out some. So that affects the geometry somewhat. Do you have any questions about the wheel?